From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. Good news! Insurance is now covering the cost of treatment for Trump derangement syndrome. Oh wait, that's not a thing. And now, broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. Time for some Pod Therapy.
You know, it's funny. There was another therapist that's actually in Oregon, and I follow him on LinkedIn, and he was saying, you know, it'd be great is if therapists would start podcasts. And I was like, okay, you know, like I saw, like he posted this big thing about like ideas for possible podcasts done by therapists, and he had 20 of them, and like all like it's funny because all 20 we've talked about, but one of them was a weekly show where you diagnose the newest mental illness of Donald Trump. I was like, wow,
who's got that kind of time?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this diagnosing the president thing, but
so this guy didn't know that we had a podcast.
Yeah, I don't think.
And he's from where?
Oregon. Yeah.
Oregon. Okay,
yeah.
So we're
not big in Oregon.
We have not hit the Pacific Northwest yet.
That's right. Yeah. Also, most people aren't aware that we have a podcast.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I don't know if the president knows. I mean, you know, Donald, if you're listening,
he's a listener.
Yeah, you know, what was that? Noviet, comrade? Is that how you say it?
Privyet.
Privyet, comrade. Yeah, you know what we're talking about. But yeah, so we are deep into the summer, and there's lots of new stuff coming out, and there's huge new research that just hit the headlines that's coming out with a new book. But I thought that we would introduce that today, and it's all about sexual fantasies, Nick.
Why not?
Why not? So sex fantasies. So Dr. Justin Lemiller, he's written several books, but he just released new research where he polled thousands of Americans, and what he came to was he figured out the top 7 sexual fantasies of the average American citizen. Isn't that interesting? The top 7 sexual fantasies. So, yeah, we're going to run through those David Letterman style, and we will list them out from 7th all the way to 1st. But before we do, let's all take a second to reflect on what our own sexual fantasies are. Maybe not say them out loud, but right now, just think to yourself, what are the top 2 things that I sexually fantasize about? Get those in your mind, because we're going to put those that list out here in a second. You can find out if you are normal. But Nick, you've already taken a look at the list, and before we even read it out, let me ask you this. Is your sexual fantasy on the list?
Which one?
Let's say this. Of your top 10, when you look at this list and you were going through it, without telling us what it is, did you notice that yours is on the list?
Yes.
Ah, you dirty, dirty dog. Yeah, that's awesome. So
and
you're
Jim?
A pervert. Yeah, no, it's weird. Your name didn't appear on this list, so I was like, oh, Nick's not on here, so I guess mine is unfulfilled so far, Nick.
Yeah.
No, but this most Americans fall into one of these 7 categories. And,
I'm going to guess multiple.
You think so? Yeah.
I think so.
I don't think people
later,
have just one.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of it feels like it would play well together.
Yeah.
I think if you rounded up all 7 of these and did it in one night, then we'd need Dr. Victoria Hartman to come back on.
I think with a little motivation, you can get all 7 of these done at once.
Oh my gosh! So if you're playing at home, go ahead and get your bingo card ready. So go ahead and write down all the sexual things you've done in bingo squares, and we're going to read out these 7. And if you get bingo, you yell it out. But let's start at the top. So make believe drum roll. The 7th most popular sexual fantasy in America was homoerotic sex. So that would be experimenting with the same gender. And what was interesting about that was not only, okay, so that first off, that I think is profound to realize that is the 7th most popular sexual fantasy in America, because there's a lot of people who still just think that that's this outlier thing.
Right.
Remember in the DSM-3, it was a diagnosed mental illness.
Right.
Was homoerotic desire.
Yeah.
It's the 7th most popular sexual fantasy in the country. Like, it's not a mental illness, you know, and so there's still people out there that don't understand, you know, homoeroticism, that still are very fearful of it. I think that argument right there shows you a slam dunk. It's the 7th most popular form of sexual fantasy in the nation. Right. And another interesting side note was that the data said 2/3 of women indicate that they have had that sexual fantasy, and 1/3 of men have said that they have that sexual fantasy. Isn't that fascinating?
That's interesting. Okay.
And that feels like the divide that I would think it is, right? Because like, you know who stares at women more often than men? Women. My wife is like very critical, and like, you know, it's like, it's really like she notices women more than I do, and like, it doesn't seem like a far cry that the average American woman would say, yeah, I'd hit that, you know, like, because they're already like admiring women all the time and like thinking about them and like, you know, appreciating their appearance. So it doesn't seem like a far cry for me.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that means that there's sexual desire though, because I'm critical of men just because I'm you know, getting into fitness,
fashion,
and fashion,
right.
and so kind of looking at, you know, what people are choosing to wear, and like, oh wow, I wish I had shoulders like that, or man, look at those calves. You know, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I. Well, that in that case, that would be.
So wait, you don't? Because everything you just said sounds like it's really not a far cry.
You know what? I think I'm losing that argument.
I think to myself. Yeah. So Nick is reaching for his bingo dauber, and he is indicating number 7 is check. So number 7. So it's interesting. So if you've ever had that fantasy in the back of your mind, or if you've ever thought, man, you know, I could see where people would get interested in this, you are not alone. That's the 7th most popular sexual fantasy in the nation, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. Okay, and then number 6, passionate sex, romantic with deep emotional connection.
So like the candles and champagne kind of sex. That's the 6th most. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because when we're talking about this, before I had actually looked at the list, that was the one that surprised me, because everything else I was thinking like, oh, there's going to be some weird, freaky stuff in here.
Yeah.
And then this one's like, oh, sex with passion.
Isn't that interesting? People fantasize about that.
That's not like that's not a normal thing.
But in fairness, you think about it, you know, like passionate, make love kind of sex, you know, candles, champagne, the works, it's a hotel room, there's flower petals on the bed. That really does fit in like a mental box of like a fantasy, right? Like there's a lot of female erotic novels that's what it would describe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and I think a lot of men too, they might not necessarily, I mean, that's not true. I know a lot of men that would say, you know, if you got to wish from a genie for a sexual experience, there's a lot of men that would probably say, yeah, I would like passion, you know, emotion, romance, and you know, it's saxophone guy playing in the background. Yeah, candles and chandeliers and all sorts of exciting things. So
bearskin rug,
yeah. It's funny because as I was going through this list, I was thinking, is there a song currently popular in the nation that pretty much captures each one of these?
Oh, that would have been a fun game.
It's a fun game because like definitely you could find something in each one, right? Like number 7, you know, the homoerotic sex, you'd probably look for like a Sam Smith song, like, you know, Stay With Me.
Or Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl.
I Kissed a Girl and I liked it. Oh, good job, Nick.
Now that's going back a few years.
It is. Yeah, it's reaching back.
Relevant.
But I think it counts. Passionate sex.
Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of Marvin Gaye or something.
Yeah,
like
there's a whole bunch though, right?
Yeah.
You know, Barry Manilow's songs, there's a whole bunch of those. But even right now, there's Bruno Mars, and he has that song about strawberry champagne or something like that, and he's like, you know, singing. The whole song captures the scene of like making love by the fire and champagne and diamonds and like this slow mix kind of thing. So interesting. That's number 6. The 6th most popular fantasy in America, passionate romantic sex. That's what people are fantasizing about. So if we haven't hit yours yet, that's okay. You're just a little bit more freaky than the average person. Don't be shamed. So here we are in number 5, the 5th most popular sexual fantasy in America is polyamory sex. So polyamory sex is like swinging and partner swapping or other non-monogamous sex. Now, it's important to note here that in the research, he indicates polyamory does not include like just random. It's not like orgy or hookup. It's basically being in a coupled relationship and then fantasizing about allowing somebody into that relationship, right? So swinging relationship or partner swapping, that kind of thing. But basically breaking the norm of what it means to be monogamous and inviting somebody into the experience. So that's pretty wild stuff, man.
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of movies that have tried to capture that idea.
Yeah. What would be the song for that one?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Somebody's going to tweet.
Sure.
Somebody's going to tweet us and go, it's this one, dummy.
Right.
You know, but it's interesting because like that, you think about it, And a lot of people, one of the big fears in America is cheating, right? It's like, oh man, I don't want to be cheated on. And yet the fifth most popular fantasy is consensual cheating. And that's what's interesting about it, is it's not like people are fantasizing about somebody else. They're fantasizing about them and their spouse participating in this agreement that they're going to meet up with another couple, switch rooms, go nuts. Isn't that the old joke? It's like it was like a fishbowl and everybody puts their keys in the fishbowl.
Yeah.
Like you just pull out the keys, like whoever's keys you got, that's who you're with tonight.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a new thing. I think it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. People are more likely to talk about it.
Oh yeah. There's like entire websites now that are like the equivalent of like eHarmony, but they're just for couples.
Right.
To like go on and find other partners that they're going to swap with or whatever. There's like swap retreats. I remember seeing something on the news. It was like there's like a swap cruise that's out there. It's like everybody there agrees that this is what they're there for. Like that's fascinating, man.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
And I mean, we've had people write into the show with questions about this.
Yeah.
We've answered, I don't remember what episode that was, but it can be done. And there are people who do it, and they have made it work.
Right.
But it can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
We've had one writer write in that I remember we were on the same page, like, okay, there are couples who can do it. This is not one of them.
You're not the guy. Yeah, you're already struggling with it.
This is not for everybody.
It's funny because I actually have a friend in the community who is actually a therapist. I won't say her name, but she's poly, and her husband's aware of it, and he consents to it. He is not. He's monogamous, and so he says, "Hey, I'm only interested in you. I only want to be with you." But she's communicated that she is attracted to other people, and she would like to be able to have third-party relationships. So she essentially has one or two boyfriends, and he's completely aware of it. They talk about it. He's, okay with it. But she, makes time to go on vacation with those guys and do her own thing. And, she's completely open with discussing it. And when she tells about this kind of stuff, which she shared with, multiple people, I remember the first time I heard her talk about it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, so he's completely fine with it. She's like, not always. He's still a human. Yeah. Like he still has his breakdowns, and it actually got to a point where it was hard for them, and they broke up for a little while over it. But apparently it was able to be mended. So it's becoming increasingly common, and a lot of people that are into it, they're very open and honest about it, and it's an interesting thing too. So if you have ever had that fantasy, then you are among the 7 most popular fantasies in America, but only the 5th. So the next one is the 4th most interesting sexual fantasy.
And that would be taboo or forbidden sex. So fetishes, role plays, voyeurism.
Yeah. So when we think about fetishes, right, that's like a broad word. Fetish, like what is that? It could be a lot of different things. But what this research was unpacking was it's taboo stuff. So it's like the role play of the police officer with the person they're arresting, or the doctor and the patient, or whatever mix up that is. A lot of people have a sexual fantasy, and this is becoming increasingly popular. We talked about this in another episode about step incest, but a very popular fantasy that's showing up is the sexual fantasy of sleeping with a step sibling or a step parent or something like that, which immediately you hear about and go, ugh, you kind of cringe, like, a step parent? Like, that's not cool. But interestingly, the porn industry releases every year the top search terms for different.
I heard about this.
Yep, it's every year they release a spreadsheet, and it's the top search terms in every country, and then they break it down by state. And increasingly, one of the patterns that I saw in the data was stepmother or stepfather was like an increasing search term that they were seeing in the patterns. So it doesn't surprise me that the 4th most popular fantasy is taboo or forbidden sex that by the nature of the two people participating or the situation, it is probably not what would be considered good. But it also includes things like role plays, where like you and your spouse act out a scene. But voyeurism is another interesting thing. A lot of people don't know what voyeurism is.
Voyeurism would be watching. Right? Or wait, I always get voyeurism confused with the other one. One is watching and one is displaying.
Oh, exhibitionism.
Yeah. So exhibitionism is that thrill of having sex with an audience, people watching.
And that's actually part of this too. Somebody. That's part of this too. So taboo or forbidden sex, voyeurism is being able to watch other people have sex, but not necessarily participate. And exhibitionism is to be seen by others. And that could be a lot of different things. It could be undressing in public. It could be keeping your blinds open or something like that, as you're coming out of the shower, knowing somebody's out there and that they are watching you. And some people are really interested in that. But fascinatingly, that is the fourth most common sexual fantasy in America, is these forbidden things, which I find interesting because it is attractive to us because it is taboo, because it is forbidden. And yet it's the fourth most common sexual fantasy ever. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's like if you were saying, like, why do you like to eat cotton candy? It's like, because it's illegal in 49 states. It's like, okay, but it's also the fourth most popular junk food. Like, that's fascinating that it would break down like that. So far, if you are marking your bingo cards, we are doing the top 7 sexual fantasies in America. 7th was homoerotic. Oh, go ahead.
And I know a song for that one.
Oh no. For the taboo one?
Yeah. For the exhibitionist.
Oh,
part.
okay. All right. What song would you?
I gotta look it up. I can't remember. Go on.
All right. So if you're playing along at home, the 7 so far. 7th was homoerotic sex. 6th was passionate romantic sex. 5th was polyamory sex, like swinging or swapping. 4th was taboo or forbidden sex, including fetishes, role plays, voyeurism, exhibitionism, stuff that you probably wouldn't see on primetime television, the kind of thing that somebody would probably censor you for. And Nick is officially out of time. What song were you thinking of?
I Get Off by Hailstorm.
It's the most
2009.
Random. Okay, I've never heard it. And if I have, I won't know.
It's a really good song.
Okay, what's it about?
It's about this woman who basically gets undressed knowing that the curtain is open.
Oh, okay.
And knowing that the guy
can see.
It can see.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Just her excitement about doing that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to look that up. I did not know. But that is the 4th most popular one, and let's take it to number 3. So these are the top 3. Top 3, drum roll please. Top 3 most common sexual fantasies in America.
Adventurous sex. So in unique places, such as outdoors or unique sex positions, Kama Sutra, etc.
It's funny because that is something that I think every couple has. It's funny because that seems like a common one, right? Like, but it's also a common joke. Like, I remember a comedian talking about that and saying, like, everybody has this fantasy that's going to be this exciting, thrilling, like, and it's like, no, you just get sand in places you didn't want, and like mosquitoes are biting you if you're by the lake.
Or like the honey, dripping honey. Because there's another comedian, I can't remember who it was, just talking about that. Like, you start at the toes and everything, but then by the time you get to kneecaps, then you're in a diabetic coma and you can't do it anymore.
Doing the honey thing. No, it's funny because, like, I've seen there's so many good comedians out there that talk about this, but like the Kama Sutra thing, like, people rent the Kama Sutra movie or they go get the book and they're like, all right, we're just going to pick 3 random positions. And that's the day you realize how out of shape you are. Like, you realize, like, what is this stuff? Like, there's so much effort that's going into this, and I guess it's exciting, but it's also like, holy crap, like, I'm going to pull something in this whole effort. And, like, it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, I suppose if you're out of shape, that's a good way to realize it.
That's the day.
If anything's going to motivate you to get to the gym.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of people
that are doing yoga. I'm not even in shape enough to have sex.
Yeah, right. I'm so out of shape I can't even have sex. But adventure sex, being out in the world, hiking trails. A doctor friend of mine who lives next door to me, he was telling me there's this park in our neighborhood, and there's like this little mountain that goes up, and it's a pretty good-sized mountain. I mean, mountain's a generous term. It's a hill or whatever, right? But there's a little path that goes up to the top and a little gazebo at the top. And he was telling me that one morning he's going for like a morning walk, and him and his wife are walking. And they take that little trail and they get up there and it's like 7, 8 a.m. And there's a swinger orgy going on, like 2 different couples like just going at it. And he's like, whoa! And he comes up there and he's like, he's a really progressive guy. He's a gynecologist, and so he's like, hey everybody, and they're just like, oh hi, and he's like, carry on. So he turned out to be a voyeur, and he was like, I'm good with this if you guys are cool. Obviously you wanted to be seen, and they were like, well, you could stick around. He's like, all right. So like, he watched for a couple minutes, and then he was like, all right, I feel like a coffee now, and just went back down. But adventure sex, yeah.
Wow.
That's how you do it, is you go out into the world and you have your adventure and try not to get sand in all the places you don't want to get sand in. But I think a lot of people think that's going to be a lot more fun than it is, and then you get out there in the world and you're like, wow, this is a lot of work. So, all right, if you are playing at home, we are down to the top 2 most common sexual fantasies in America. And number 2, the second most popular sexual fantasy in America, is power and control sex. So with that, we're talking about things like rough sex, BDSM, violent sex. So think like 50 Shades of Grey. And Nick, are you surprised to find out that that is the second most popular sexual fantasy in America?
Am I surprised to find out that the book that was about that sold millions of copies?
Yeah, and it turns out that's really popular.
Yeah, I think.
Maybe
I think
not.
that was a pretty good indicator, right there.
Pretty good, yeah. And when I think about the song, obviously there was a song by the girl who sang "Umbrella," Ella, A.
Yeah, I know the song. I don't know who's.
Her name's Rihanna. But she had a song called BDSM.
Oh,
and like it was fascinating because she had gone through this whole violent sexual and physical assault relationship with another rapper named Chris Brown, but then she released the song about how she really likes the physical aggression, violence inside the bedroom. But it's interesting. I remember one time at the rehab, Nick got so frustrated with this female client, and she was just ridiculous, and she was driving us all crazy. And so he, was talking to her in the office, and then he yells at her, and he's like, what do you want? Or something to that effect. He just yelled at her and said, raise his voice, and she was like stunned. But then she ended up being cool and like realizing, what, I'm out of control. And I was talking to her later, and she goes, I do not like to be yelled at, except in the bedroom. And she was like, I've never had anybody be that aggressive with me.
I didn't know at the time.
Sure you didn't. But it was funny because it made me laugh because she was like, no, he tuned me up. Like he got through to me. But usually I only like that much male aggression in the bedroom. I was like, oh my God. But I hear a lot of people talk about this. It is very common. And what's interesting is something like 70% of couples identify that they have experimented with that. And so it's interesting because we still think of it as taboo, but you're seeing it in popular media now. If you go to any like sex store, you're going to find whips and chains and ball gags and all these other, kind of things that go along with it. But a lot of people like it. They talk about the experience of giving away their power, giving away control. And for me, Nick, it's interesting because I think about human evolution. And I think about how sex, in its incarnation, at its very center, there's something physically violent about sex. And it sort of has these characteristics that seem reminiscent of caveman hunting days, and it's an interesting thing. Like the Me Too movement revealed how many men are like sexually aggressive, and and we sort of weren't surprised. We were all like, yeah, because it has that element to it, where it's sort of fiery. And I think that's an interesting thing when I think about the human evolution of sexuality and what sex must have been like in caveman days and tribal days, and how it probably didn't always have consent as a part of it.
I'm sure it was a lot more forceful.
I think it was, and like it's interesting that there's and that's what's interesting about the second one, I think, is that you have to contrast, I want physical violence in my sex, with a lot of people that are now revealing that sex violence is happening out there in the world. And I think that's the inherent contradiction, that it is a fantasy and it's still improper, and like it has to be consensual.
Right. And this is all of these really go back. They really have a foundation in having a very open and honest communication with your partner, and everything is worked out in advance and very careful, planned out, thought out, all of that. Otherwise, everything that we're talking about could be absolutely devastating.
Oh yeah, or criminal. But what's amazing about it is, like, when I think about these the lists, it's interesting how sexuality and sexual fantasy reveals so much about the instincts of man. And I think that's what's neat about sex to me, and I think that's why a lot of people feel very vulnerable with sex is part of you in such an instinctive way. If you tell your friend, this is what I like pizza. How do you like your pizza? Oh, I like it with sausage and pineapple. That is not an instinctive description of who you are. Like, I don't really care. That doesn't tell me. But if you're sitting down with your friend, you tell them your sexual fantasy, there's no takesies backsies.
Yeah, you can't unring that bell.
You can't unring that bell. You can't dismiss it. And we know that we're sort of revealing this incarnate truth about ourselves. And it's fascinating because, Dr. Victoria Hartman would tell you you're overthinking it. Like sex can just be as superficial as appetite, and you're allowing it to have too much power. But I think it does have a lot of power. I think it does have a lot of psychological power.
Because it's not quite out in the open yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about what toppings we like on our pizza because we're, for the most part, not going to be judged unless you say, like, you want pineapple on your pizza. Then for some reason people want to judge you for that.
Right.
But aside from that, it's like, whatever.
Whatever.
But, yeah, we're not quite there yet with
it's not popular. And like this number 2 most popular sexual fantasy, power and control sex. I had a client once in my private practice. This individual was a very powerful person in our community, and they were very much in charge of organization, and they were a very prominent person. And the thing that we were working on was this person had basically gotten caught by their spouse being somebody who wants to be dominated sexually. And so this person was showing up in environments and places and setting up these casual encounters where he was being sexually dominated by women and men that, were his partners, and then it all got exposed. And it was interesting because we talked about that deeper psychology. Why do you long to have power taken away from you? And he was fascinating because he was like, because I am so powerful. And he was like, I have so much control over my life, and so many people salute me and are afraid of me, and I am an A-type, and I'm always in charge. But there was something for him very releasing about letting go of power and having somebody else have control over him.
Does this person have any connections with the mob? I just need to know if I'm safe as you're talking about this and sharing it on the radio.
I didn't say his name.
Okay, yeah, all right.
But listen, Steve Wynn's going to be just fine.
Oops. We'll fix that.
Yeah, all his fiascos have already come out. But
it wasn't actually Steve.
It was not actually Steve Wynn. I should clarify.
Let's clarify.
All right, so we have so far listed the top 6 or the back 6 sexual fantasies in America. We are working up to number 1, but let's recap. 7th place, homoerotic sex. 6th place, passionate romantic sex. 5th place, polyamory, swinging, swapping kind of sex. 4th place, taboo or forbidden sex like fetishes and role plays. 3rd place, adventurous sex, unique places, unique positions. 2nd place, power and control sex like BDSM, rough sex, or semi-violent sex. And in 1st place, the most popular sexual fantasy in America, according to Dr. Justin Lemiller, is multi-partner sex. So that would be like threesomes, orgies, gangbangs, just humans in a bed.
And he separated this from polyamory how?
So polyamory is this couple intentionally breaking the coupledom to go out and have an experience extramaritally. The fantasy is to be in a couple and break the couple. In this number 1, the fantasy is multiple humans,
right?
In any context.
They're not really connected to any one particular human.
That part of the fantasy is not the violation of the agreement or inviting somebody into the relationship. The fantasy in number 1 here, multi-partner sex, is just sex with group, like jump in. So, threesomes, orgies, gangbangs, just humans piling up and just having it out. And I think that there's a stranger quality to that. Whereas the polyamory is sort of, you actually have a triangle, like relationship with person A, relationship with person B. But in this one, it's just pile of humanity. And so, of course, this is valuable to us, Nick, because Las Vegas just recently played host to the national record-holding orgy, though it just fell short of the world record orgy, which apparently Japan held. But Dr. Hartman came on the show and told us all about this. So multi-partner threesomes, orgies, gangbangs, that is the number 1 most popular sexual fantasy in America. So if you have had that fantasy or that experience, congratulations, because most people in America, according to this research, admire you.
Yeah. So, one of the most common questions that we get as therapists is it normal that I blank?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So, I guess if the way you filled in that blank was any of the things that we listed, I guess we can say, yeah, that's normal.
You now know what the 7 most popular sexual fantasies are in America. And so if you have any of those or have entertained any of those, you are normal. And you know what else is interesting about that, Nick? If you are in a relationship, if you have a spouse or a partner or somebody that you're with, and you have these fantasies, but you've never talked about it, hey, what's interesting about this list is it's a way for you guys to have a conversation and, talk about what are we both interested in and what, is something that we're open to. And I think that's, a really interesting thing that they could be talking about, because I want to destigmatize sex. And, Dr. Hartman's sort of on that trajectory as well, and just wanting to help people kind of break down barriers. And, what's interesting, Nick, is there's actually online tests that you can take. One's called Mojo Upgrade, mojoupgrade.com. I remember I heard about this from a sex therapist. Mojoupgrade.com. Two members of a couple can go onto this website independently. They connect through email. So like the website figures out both of your emails, and then it gives you a survey and basically says, of all of these things, what would you like to do? What are you willing to do? What's off limits? And it's interesting because it goes through everything. Like, this is not for the faint of heart. This thing is the most X-rated survey you'll ever see in your life. But what's interesting is once both partners take the test, it then sends the results to each other. But it omits anything you didn't have in common. So that way your secret's safe. Like if one of the things on here was, I want to do rape role play, and the other person they clicked no on that box, it will not reveal to the no person that you said yes. It will only reveal the things in the middle of the Venn. And like, that's a pretty safe test.
I just imagine getting an email back from the company. It just says, get out.
Get out. The FBI is on their way to your house. We've reported this.
You are not safe. Get out.
Get out of the house. But yep, so that is sexual fantasies and how you can talk to your partner about them.
So my mom has not yet listened to an episode of Pod Therapy.
This will be the one.
And I know it will be.
This is going to be the one.
She's going to be like, oh, I'll listen.
Yeah. She's going to call you and go,
let's check out episode 29.
She's going to go, I got bingo like 5 different ways.
My God. I don't want to think about that. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have some listener mail about being successful but feeling inadequate. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our first listener mail comes to us from Jake and deals with feelings of inadequacy. So here's the letter. He titles it, I am successful on paper, but still feel inadequate. Hi, Nick and Jim. I'm a physics PhD student set to graduate in a month. I already have a postdoc position at a university lined up after I graduate. I think by social standards that I can say I'm successful. However, regardless of how much success I have, I feel a deep, visceral inadequacy. I can always pause and take the time to suppress those visceral feelings with rational thinking about how I've earned what I have, but this can be draining. I find myself constantly trying to irrationally reason that none of my success is deserved. It's just luck, or none of my work actually contributes to science. I'd like to be able to look at my work and my position and not feel ashamed of it. It's affecting how I interact with people, and I'm becoming much more reclusive because of these feelings. As I'm typing this, I'm realizing how much of this sounds like imposter syndrome. I'm seeking therapy for this, and I'm seeing a therapist. And that's helping. But I was hoping to hear another perspective on it, and hopefully have it discussed on the show for any other listeners who are experiencing the same thing. Thanks, Jake.
Awesome. Great question.
Yeah.
And a PhD in physics. That's
wow.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
90% of the time, I cannot spell physics. I always get it wrong.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I would say one of the things that he listed or that he said he felt was the imposter syndrome. So to the listener out there, to kind of explain what that is, it's basically just this idea that you feel like you are not the person that you're pretending to be. Like, I'm not qualified enough to do this one thing, but I feel like I just have to fake it, right? It's that kind of sense. That's pretty normal. So in my job, I've been in this field for 15 years, and I still have this.
Right.
I was kind of joking to Jim about this the other day, that I had to do a training. I had to teach a webinar, and it was for other therapists, and it was on substance abuse specifically. And I think the therapist group they're out in the Midwest someplace. And so I had no idea who these people were. I got called in at the last minute to fill in for the other teacher who was supposed to be doing it. And I just felt really inadequate. And I'm like, oh my God, like I shouldn't be doing this. But then, after talking to him for about 5-10 minutes, I felt very comfortable. I was like, no, I do know what I'm doing.
Right.
Right. And, it's a very common thing. And I think you just kind of have to continue to throw yourself into it and just, develop some self-confidence and being able to, speak to what you know. And you're not going to know everything. I mean, that's the other thing too. You're just wrapping up your PhD, right? So you're just kind of getting into the field. I get the sense that especially the younger generations have this idea that the most important thing for them is to feel like they are making an impact in their discipline. To feel like you are contributing to moving society forward with whatever skill set you have. And that idea that I think sometimes it gets misconstrued that you think you're going to have an impact right away. I've been doing this for 8 months. I should be making an impact.
Right.
Well, maybe not. I mean, you could be doing this for a long time. Maybe your impact is happening after being in the field for 15 years. I mean, I didn't make an impact in my field for, some would say, 15 years.
You've been very effective in your field. But, I empathize. I mean, I think that we all have felt this way, Jake. All of us have looked at our lives and said, oh, shoot, I'm faking it. They're going to call me doctor, so-and-so. And I empathize with this. I also did doctoral training. And I remember when it was done, I remember one of my professors, when I came up on stage and, shook her hand and everything, and she said, "Congratulations, Dr. Jobin." And it was like this weird, like I wanted to look over my shoulder thing and go, who the hell are you talking to? And it took some getting used to of people even saying that. And, I immediately remember that imposter syndrome of like, everybody's going to figure out that I have no clue what I'm talking about, that, that I don't measure up to what this word sounds like or to other things. And I think that's what the essence of imposter syndrome is to believe that you are going to be exposed as the fraud that you secretly are. That there are areas that you don't know, and you don't immediately confess that you don't know those things. And because of that, other people start to give you this benefit of the doubt thing, and one day you're going to lose it, right? One day you're going to lose all their confidence, lose their faith, and you're sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dude, Jake, I completely empathize with that. And I Nick's nodding his head to this. And we're, professionals, and we actually are pretty competent. And it's funny how, what Nick said, and I think what I see you saying in this letter, is that when you think about it carefully, though, there's evidence that suggests that you are competent. There is training that you couldn't fake, degrees that you couldn't fake, the evidence of this postdoc position that you cannot fake. And you have to go through, as you're doing, and remind yourself of the evidence of your craft. What Nick was talking about, how he goes into this webinar, he's training other therapists, and, he walks in thinking, shoot, what can I teach these guys? These are all professionals like me. Some of them are older than me. They're going to know more than me. But then as you interact with them, you realize, no, I'm pretty competent at this. I actually know what I'm doing. And I think you have to kind of list those things to yourself. You have to go back and almost in a mental listing kind of way, as I see him doing in this rationality way, I want you to examine the evidence for your feeling. Put the thought on trial. I feel inadequate. Is that feeling a fact? Because inadequacy is a yes or no question. We can figure it out. Like if my plumber shows up and can't fix the thing, he was inadequate for that job, right? He is not competent to accomplish the job. So what's interesting about imposter syndrome is it can often be exposed as true or false, and it also has gradients, right? Like a lot of times you don't know that yet. I have never stepped into a job where I had 100% of the knowledge that I needed to do that job. I had to learn on the fly. And that's part of what makes me a competent professional, is that intellectual curiosity, that adaptability. And I think that's what makes you, as a PhD person, somebody that's graduating in physics, nobody expects, Jake, that by the time you collect your PhD for physics, you now know physics. Like you figured it all out. As a highly educated person, one of the things that you probably know is how little you know.
Yeah, that's always the thing that I appreciate most about scientists, is that scientists are willing to say, I don't know. And there's a bit of humility behind that, and just being able to say, like, look, I don't have the answer to that. I'm still exploring this myself.
Right.
That's one of the best qualities of being a scientist.
And here's the great paradox of confidence. I want everybody to listen to what I'm about to say, because this expands beyond Jake. The great paradox of confidence is that the least qualified are usually the most competent. And the most qualified are usually pensive and contemplative and thoughtful because they have a depth of understanding that usually reveals what they don't know. And they usually don't feel comfortable making assertions or acting on bravado. And I know for me, in my career, when I've worked in corporate settings, it's sometimes been really discouraging because, I actually am competent on some things. I actually know what I'm talking about. And then some other fool will walk around and brazenly announce things with 100%, loudness and smugness like they know this.
If I say it louder, I'm more correct.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because I often don't contradict them. I don't debate them because I have the quiet certitude of knowing that I'm right and almost pitying them. But when the audience, the third person, sees us both, they often side with the confident person, right? Because that person seems brazen, like they've got it, and I'm not necessarily refuting them. And so they often don't realize that actually the quieter person is usually the competent one. So I would argue this, Jake, that feeling of insecurity, that feeling of impostorness, that actually, to me, assures me that you are qualified. It assures me that you are competent. One of the things that I look for when I interview other therapists or when I'm working with other professionals is I do want to see that they're confident, right? I do want to see that they're not second-guessing everything and that they do feel self-secure. They know who they are, right? And I want them to be self-assured. But I also assess for bravado. I remember, Nick, one time I interviewed a therapist, a young therapist. She was an up-and-comer, and she wanted to join the team, and I liked her a lot. I thought she was really neat. And I remember telling her, well, hey, you're new to this career, so like if I don't go with you, I don't want you to take that as a mark against you. It could just be that I hired somebody that's got more experience, but I want to encourage you and tell you how much I think of you. I think you're a really great up-and-comer. And I remember this person, you weren't with me in this interview. Oh. This person told me, Dr. Jobin, I want you to realize something. She looked me dead in the eye. She goes, I'm going to win a Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize. She goes, I'm going to win a Nobel Prize. I was like, okay. And she goes, that's who I am. And I was horrified because
I am glad I was not in there. Yeah. I would have just started laughing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, good for you to have that confidence.
Another therapist was with me and he was looking at, like, we were both like, okay. And like, she left and we both looked at each other like, all right, like, that's a no. Like, way too much, too brazen, too bravado, too confident. There's no intellectual humility.
And so wouldn't you know it? She ended up winning a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, dang it. She did really good. Sorry, Malala.
And we're just stuck here with this podcast.
Yeah, we ended up with a podcast. But, Jake, what you're feeling is completely normal. Work it out in therapy. Rehearse it with yourself. Self-talk is really important, too.
The other thing that Jake mentions here, he says that it's affecting how I interact with people, and I'm becoming much more reclusive because of these feelings. And if what you're talking about, Jake, excuse me, is talking with other people in your field, I want you to really challenge that thought too, because I'm willing to bet that they are experiencing the exact same thing that you are. Yeah. They're just not talking about it. Or they're, with the bravado, they are stuffing it down. Yeah. But I guarantee you anybody has at least some feelings of insecurity and a lack of self-assurance.
And, find somebody in your life who you can tell that to. But let me give you some real advice, okay? Real talk. Because as therapists, we're always like, no, be honest, be authentic, be genuine. No, don't do that to everybody, right? I don't want you to bare your soul to everybody. To my competitors in my field, I reveal brazen confidence. If anything, I personally choose to err on the side of narcissism. And that has boded well for me because I have the credentials, but they also go, geez, Jim, if Jim doesn't know the answer, you wouldn't know it. Like, he seems like he's got it. But to a very select small group of people, they get to see my insecurity. They get to know that I don't feel like I'm always up to the task, or I feel like a fake sometimes, or I feel like I was just, hoping for the best. And those people have earned my trust. That's a safe place for me. And it sounds like you have a therapist that you can talk to. Find that outlet, because that's really important, because that person is a good sounding board to remind you who you truly are. But then also be brave. Be brave. Don't cower. Stand up to it. And I know this is a statement that a lot of people don't like, but I agree with it. Fake it till you make it. Stand strong, and sometimes you have to wear the crown before you feel like the king. Put it on, stand strong, and see yourself through the eyes of those who admire you.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. That's some good advice. Yeah, let us know, Jake. Write back and keep us posted on this.
And when you start a physics podcast, let us know, because I have so many questions. I love Star Talk.
I do too.
But you got off topic. Like, now we interview celebrities, and I want to talk about science stuff. So start it up, Jake. We're with you, dude. We'll promote your podcast. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will hear from a listener having challenges with acceptance. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in anonymously and is asking about self-acceptance. Do I accept who I am and risk not growing? I care about recognition. I care about what other people think of me. I want to excel at something and be recognized/praised for it. When should someone stop trying to change themselves and just accept who they are? I feel like I'd be happier if I just accepted myself and embraced who I was as a person, but I also feel like I'd stop growing as a person and I wouldn't get any deeper understanding of what my actual unmet needs are. Is that okay?
Gosh, that's a great question. This question, Nick, goes to the essence of values. And here's what I mean by that. I do a lot of guidance counseling where people come in and they're, college person, or they're a young person, or even in a midlife crisis, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. And one of the things that I'm most interested in having is a conversation about their personal values. Not what you think would make you happy. Look in your life. Where did you derive the most amount of satisfaction, right? Because there's a lot of people that if you offer them the job of being famous talk show host or something like that, they would say, oh my God, yes, right? Because that's meaningful and relevant and I'll be a big deal. But you might be miserable, right? There's a lot of famous people who are miserable, or there's a lot of people who have achieved the greatest gains, and then you find out that they commit suicide or something to that effect. They were unhappy. And I like this question because it's talking about self-acceptance, embracing who I am, even if there are times when I wish I could do something and be recognized or praised for it. And so the first thing that I would want you to take a look at, Anonymous, is I'd want you to evaluate, what are your personal values? Do you value finances? That's fair. That doesn't make you a bad person. Is that how you think of where your life satisfaction comes from? Do you value meaningful work? The results that you get in your life and what you do in your life. Do you value affirmation? Being respected, being noticed by other people. That's okay for that to be something that you really value. Do you value lifestyle? Does it not matter to you what you do or how you did it, as long as you're living comfortably and your family's taken care of or whatever? I want you to sort of sit down and suss that out, because by doing that, I think it helps you develop that deeper understanding of your actual unmet needs and figure out, what steps do I take toward the things that produce the most life satisfaction for me?
Yeah, my feedback was really going to go in the same direction. I think we were just kind of using different language. When you're talking about accepting who I am, my first thought is, well, how do you know who you are? Let's start with that. And I think that's where what you're talking about fits in. You were using the words of values, right? So your values kind of define who you are. So I would agree with that. I think our feedback to this listener is kind of along the same lines, really going back and looking at what are the things that make you you. What are the things that you describe as being your essence, your soul, your person, how you identify that, and then in what ways does that show, or what ways do you show that in your lifestyle?
Yeah.
As far as accepting who you are and not growing, one of the things that I was kind of thinking of when reading this is accepting the fact that we all have shortcomings. And what are those? Can I accept these things? But then by doing that, does that mean that I'm not going to grow? Well, that's a tough one. Maybe in that area. But I think the shortcomings, like, we all need to know what strengths we have. We also need to know what weaknesses we have. I know what some of my weaknesses are.
Bullets.
Yeah. Weird, right? For some
Bullets,
reason,
my only weakness.
Can't seem to survive
bounce off me. Gravity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, But I also think that sometimes we give up on things, we identify weaknesses, and then we give up on them, not because we think that we can't do it, or maybe that's what we believe. We believe that we can't overcome this weakness, when in reality, I think most of the time, it's because we're not willing to do what it takes to overcome the weakness, right? I really, truly believe that I could be on the PGA Tour. I could be a professional golfer. I truly believe that. But what it would take for me to do that
isn't worth it.
Is not worth it. I can't. I'm not willing to make that kind of sacrifice and take those risks, because that would mean I'd have to quit my job.
Right.
Because I'd have to be practicing every day.
Right.
That means I'd probably have to go into therapy, because I do not have the mental stamina to compete at that level.
Man.
Like, if I miss a 4-foot putt,
Right.
I lose nothing.
Right.
If I was on the PGA Tour,
You lost everything.
that's a lot of money.
I would Happy Gilmore. I would Happy Gilmore all over the place, throwing the clubs, hitting the caddy.
Exactly. So I don't have what it takes. Those are my weaknesses. But that doesn't mean that those can't be overcome.
Right.
It's going to take a lot for me to overcome those.
Yeah.
So we have to look at, the next question then is, once you identify what you want in life, the next question is what are you willing to do what are you willing to work on? What are you willing to sacrifice to make those things happen? Don't think that, well, I have to accept who I am because I can't overcome these things. No, you can overcome those things. But are you willing, do you have the fortitude to work through that? Are you willing to invest in that and work really hard, and sometimes not seeing any gains for a long time?
Yeah.
That's really the challenging part.
And that goes back to the question of values, right? Because if we're in therapy together and I ask you the question of values and we do the techniques that help me suss that out, if I identify that a very important quality for you, a very important value is that recognition, then what that teaches me is let's aim for something you're really good at and let's get you to that place where you're PGA Tour ready, even if you're not passionate about the process. But there's a lot of other people that they don't care if they're ever recognized for what they do. It'd be nice. They'd love to get the Employee of the Month award. But they do enjoy what they do every day. There's a passion to the process. Yeah. And if that's the value, then great. We can align your life for that. But what I see in this question too in the beginning, this anonymous person writes, I care about recognition and I do care about what other people think of me. There is this false statement that I hear all the time, and I hear it especially on the internet, and it's usually from people who apparently do care very much, what other people think. Mm-hmm. And they get on there and say, I don't care. I don't give an F. What any of you guys think. I'm going to do me. Only God can judge me. Hashtag, whatever. And I see it all the time. And then, a bunch of people comment like, you go girl, yeah, me too. I don't care what these people think of me. And it's like, yes, you do. You just posted that on social media. You clearly do care. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's better when we humanly admit that up front. And that's what I like about this writer is saying, I care about recognition. So do I. Yeah. I care about what other people think of me. So do I. And I don't want you to undo that. There's a possibility that you could care too much and you could be hypersensitive, and I want to rein that in. But I don't want to train this out of you. I want you to have those qualities. I think it will make you excellent in life.
If we didn't care what other people thought, we wouldn't shower.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I think that's fair. I think it's good that you know that about yourself. And as somebody that I see that in myself too, what I'll tell you is this. Try to set yourself up to succeed. I know that if I desire to be recognized and praised, now's not the time to try to aim for being the best pianist in the land. It's been too long. I'm not good at that, right? I like playing music, but I'll never be a great musician. And it's important to have an accurate self-assessment of my own strengths, as Nick sort of said, and realizing what things I actually am good at, and then being creative and sort of robust in those strengths. That way I can sort of exhibit who I am to others and hope that they notice. But even if they don't, to go back out and do that again and try my best at it.
Right. So if we're talking about, this recognition and praise as being like a skill or something that you want to develop, a talent, something like this, I think the feedback that we've given is really good. Now let's switch gears for a second and talk about, because we're talking about this person writes in, When should someone stop trying to change themselves? So the changing themselves part is the part that we don't have a whole lot of information off of to really answer this question. But Jim, what are your thoughts if changing themselves is something about their personality or something about a characteristic they have? Say, for example, part of myself is anger. Let's say I've just got extreme anger and extreme rage. I've recognized that as being my weakness. I've tried working on it. I can't seem to change anything. Should I just accept this as who I am?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of change. I think that if your qualities are problematic in your life and they're causing you to stub toes on reality, then I want us to take a look at it, right? I'd like to sand you down and get you to a place where you're meeting the world on its terms. And, as this writer's talking about, I care a lot about what other people think. At what point do I just accept me and stop caring what other people think? Again, I do think that there's a good balance here, right? I do want, if you're a performer by nature and you desire to shine, I don't want to take that away from you. I want there to be a part of your world where you do get to shine a little bit and you do get to perform. And that could be something we have to create together, and create a space for you to join public theater or whatever and do something. But I also don't want you to be inhibited by the opinions of others to the point where you're incapacitated by that and you're obsessed with it. And it stops you from being who you are because you're trying to live up to the expectations of other people. That's not healthy either. And that's something we would probably be working on changing in therapy.
Yeah. And I think the other part of this too is this recognition, and part of this may be a generational thing. I'm probably going to get a little heat for saying this, but I think with the younger generation, younger than me, of course.
Okay.
I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the people who came after
Everybody
me. Everything was
under
fine.
You. Yeah.
Until the people after me.
Okay, got it. So anybody born in the 80s, 90s, or afterward sucks. Got it. Noted.
But we live in a different society now where things come really easy to us. Okay, if you and I are having a disagreement about something, about a factual event that happened, we have access to the answer in our fingertips, right? We Google it. We got everything that just happens very quickly and very easily. And we see this, especially when it comes with recognition and praise. People that we know that become YouTube famous or, have podcasts that are successful, kind of like ours.
Yeah, right.
But this idea that like all I have to do is I just need to do a few small things and then I get all this fame and money and I get this recognition.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a new mindset that is starting to come through in our generation and the generation after us because we have access to all this.
Yeah, and it sort of builds on the question to a new question, but I think that there's truth to that. There's an old statement that I love. I don't remember who said it, but it came from the Revolutionary War, and it was, "That which is too easily attained is too lightly esteemed." And I love that line because, if you earn it, you value it. And I remember for my son, he's 8. And he'd want to buy a video game or whatever, and I'd be like, yeah, sure. And it's like $20. And I was thinking, like, dude, when I was 8 years old, getting $20 was hard. And so I started making him do chores to earn it. And like now he thinks about it. Like if he's like, hey, I want that video game, it's $20. I'd be like, okay, you have $20 to give me? And he thinks about it, and he's like thinking of all the things he did to get that $20. And now he's like, well, let me take my time on this. And when he gets that video game, dude, he plays it like to the last drop because it's like, hey, I sweat for this. Like I'm gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, I remember that exact same experience when I was a kid, and we were talking about we had a water gun fight, and everybody had the super soaker that they got downtown. It was $15.
Yeah,
And so I asked my dad, and he was like, "No, you can't have it."
Yeah,
but if you want to work for that $15, then you can go purchase it yourself.
Yeah, and then you're like really protective of it. I remember the first bike I bought, I was like shining it in the garage.
So to the listener, I guess that's the thing. Like if you want that kind of recognition, you want that praise, there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of keeping your eye focused on the effort and the work it's going to take to make that happen and make that work enjoyable. Yeah. Whatever the effort it takes to accomplish that and get to climb that mountain, enjoy it.
Yes. And thanks for writing in.
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us on Facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at PodTherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.